Today on November 11th, 2021, we mark the 103rd anniversary of the end of World War I. World War I is absolutely in the shadow of World War II, which is a shame as World War I is a very interesting and brutal part of history as well. World War I is my favorite war to learn about, and I find it a great shame that not many people know very much about it. With this video, I want to change that. I want to give some brief facts about the war, and maybe you can learn a thing or two about this overshadowed, bloody conflict that took place 103 years ago. The Great War, as World War I was called before World War II took place, started as the Archduke of Austro-Hungary, Franz Ferdinand, was assassinated by a Serbian nationalist named Gavrilo Princip. The government of Austria-Hungary believed that the Serbian government was responsible for the assassination. Heavy demands were given to Serbia by Austria-Hungary, and when Serbia refused to comply with these demands, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on July 28, 1914. I often see a misconception that Germany, or in this timeline, the German Empire, had started World War I. This misconception is probably made since Nazi Germany had started World War II, and people with a basic understanding of World War II likely just assume that World War I is exactly like World War II. But in reality, these wars were very different from one another. Germany is not responsible for World War I, which we will talk about later. And if you really want to blame a country for starting World War I, then it is either Austria-Hungary or Serbia. But I personally find that this war is much more complex than just pointing a finger at one single nation. From here, the war becomes a scenario where each country basically says to the other country, "Hey, you're trying to kick my friend's ass, now I'm gonna kick your ass." And the cycle is very long. Russia declared war on Austria-Hungary since they were an ally of Serbia. Then Germany declared war on Russia since Austria-Hungary was a German ally. Then France declared war on Germany, since Russia was a French ally. You can see the cycle happening here. The British Empire wasn't present in the very start of the war, but that soon changed. Along France's border with Germany, there were huge defenses that the French had to fight the Germans. Germany wanted to defeat France first and fast, so that it could then place its armies to fight Russia. But with these defenses in the Germans' way, there was no way that Germany would be able to defeat France in time before Russia became ready for war. In order to bypass the defenses, Germany had invaded Belgium in order to go around the French defenses and invade France. This was known as the Schlieffen Plan. Britain remained neutral at the start of the war, but once Belgium, a neutral country like Britain, was invaded by Germany, the British joined on the side of the Entente against the Central Powers. We now see two main sides of this war, with the Central Powers consisting of Germany, Austria-Hungary, and also the Ottoman Empire and Bulgaria, who later joined the war. And then there was the Entente, which consisted of France, Britain, Russia, Serbia, and several other nations who joined later. I won't go into too much detail about the various countries that joined the Entente, but I do want to talk about Italy, at least. Italy was a former ally of both Germany and Austria-Hungary, but once the Entente promised Italy would gain lands from Austria-Hungary if the war was won, Italy joined the war on the Entente's side, declaring war on Austria-Hungary. The Italians and Austro-Hungarians would fight against each other inside the Alpine Mountains. Germany was incredibly close to taking Paris, and had Paris fallen, a war could have had a Central Powers victory. But the war was mostly a stalemate in the west, with both sides digging trenches, firing artillery at each other, and trying to desperately rush each other's trenches with sways of armies. This was known as trench warfare. In the east, however, there was a much more different story. The Russian Empire was undergoing a revolution. The Russian Revolution. The Russian people were tired of fighting the war, were low on food, starving, and desperate reforms were demanded of the Tsar of Russia. Many Russians turned to communism, believing that it would make Russia into a glorious utopia where everyone could eat, Everyone could have peace and everyone could have land. Thus, the revolution began with the Communist Red Army, led by Vladimir Lenin, who promised peace, land, and food to the Russian people, fighting the anti-communist White Army, led by Tsar Nicholas II. With help from the Central Powers, especially Germany, the Red Army toppled the White Army. The Russian Empire was no more, and the reign of the Soviets began. This allowed Germany to concentrate more on the West, as the East was no longer a threat. I simply cannot complete this video without mentioning the Armenian Genocide. Before Russia had fallen to the Soviets, the Russian Empire had been fighting the Ottoman Empire near modern-day Armenia. Armenia is a Christian nation, whereas the Ottoman Empire, led by what is now modern-day Turkey, is an Islamic nation. The Armenians were different in culture, language, and religion, and once the Ottoman Empire had taken heavy losses against the Russian Empire, the Ottomans blamed the Armenian minority for their defeats. Armenian men, women, and children were forced out of their homes so Turks could replace them. Women were sold as sex slaves to Turkish men. Armenian men were sent on death marches in the desert. Some were sent into the Black Sea by boat and kicked off into the middle of the ocean where they would die. Estimates show 2 million innocent Armenian intellectuals, men, women, and children were killed by the Ottoman Empire's officers and killing squads in an effort to Turkify the empire and to ethnically cleanse the region. These atrocities are being denied to ever happen by the Turkish government even today, and there is a vast number of countries who have yet to recognize these events happening, as Turkey holds an important location, military and economically, in our world. Be the change in this world. Learn the history of our world so we are not doomed to repeat its horrors. Recognize and spread the truth of the Armenian Genocide. The East was now clear from any Entente threats. Now the West could be focused on by the Central Powers. But as Germany defeated one giant, that would be the Russian Empire, it would also bring another into the war. The United States had also been a neutral country, and the American people were very against the idea of joining the war. The government as well was not too keen on joining also. This was known as isolationism, where the American people and government preferred to keep out of the world's affairs and to focus mainly on American problems, such as the economy, new laws, and such. But Germany's actions would end this neutrality. We can look at the sinking of the Lusitania as one of these actions. The Lusitania was a ship sunk by the German Empire's navy, a ship that held nearly 100 Americans on it. This wasn't the moment America had joined the war, but America's views on Germany had started to turn sour. Afraid of the Americans joining the war, Germany sent a telegram to Mexico offering a deal to the Mexican state. In the telegram that Germany sent to Mexico, they had promised the Mexicans that if they were to attack America, then the territories that were lost in the Mexican-American War would be given back to Mexico. This telegram was intercepted by British intelligence, and once the British had shown the telegram to the United States government, war was declared on Germany by the US. A new power had come to fight Germany, and the US's entry into the war would be the final nail in the Central Powers' coffins. The war would end on November 11th, the 11th month, on the 11th day, on the 11th hour, in a victory with the Entente and a devastating defeat with the Central Powers. Heavy limitations, reparations, and treatment would be placed upon Germany, as the war was blamed on Germany, despite the country being dragged into the war by their ally. These heavy conditions from the Treaty of Versailles would drag Germany into poverty, inflation, starvation, and misery. Much like how the Russians turned to communism in their desperate times, the Germans would turn to Adolf Hitler and fascism in their desperate times. This would later start World War II. I could go on about facts of this war, such as today being Veterans Day in America because Veterans Day was originally called Armistice Day to celebrate our victory in World War I. That's right, you have school off today because 100 years ago, a Serbian man killed the Austro-Hungarian emperor by taking a wrong turn in a car. Or like how Japan had fought against Germany to take German islands, and then they became allies in World War II. Or the brutal fighting in Africa between Germany, Portugal, the British, and French. Also the Arabian revolutions against the Ottoman Empire. Or the African American Hellfighters, or the 1 million Indians who fought for the British Crown, fighting for someone else's freedom rather than their own. Or the Australians and Canadians fighting alongside the British as well. Or the truce between Germany and Russia to eliminate the local wolf threat. Or the Christmas truce on the Western Front, where the Germans, French, and British came out of their trenches to peacefully celebrate Christmas together. Or that Mexico would never join the war against America because that is a dumbass idea. This video is starting to get rather long, however, so I won't go over all of these niche details that really deserve their own videos. I encourage all of you to look in the description to see more videos about this infamous war, to play Battlefield 1 if you can, as it takes place in the trenches, deserts, and forests of World War I, and to keep learning of this great war. Thank you for watching.